So before we break for morning tea and then split off into the various rooms for the concurrent workshops, panels, and presentations, our final offering on the main stage this morning is a panel on rethinking humanitarian leadership through partnerships featuring voices from philanthropy. The panel will be moderated by Cheyenne Ellis from the Clinton Global Initiative and will be followed by a Q&A moderated by Matt Tinkler from Save the Children Australia. Now, to introduce our moderator, Cheyenne V. Ellis leads the humanitarian response team at the Clinton Global Initiative, also known as CGI, at the Clinton Foundation. CGI is a convening organization that brings advocacy and awareness through its global platform. In this role, Cheyenne also helps lead CGI's Haiti Action Network and Ukraine Action Network. She joined CGI originally to help lead the economic inclusion work and build CGI Greenhouse, a program for social impact entrepreneurs. Originally from Texas, Cheyenne has worked in local economic development, specializing in workforce development in New Orleans, Louisiana, where she's currently based. She also works in the Office of Children's Issues at the U.S. Department of State and helped to launch the Global Economics Program with DIS in Copenhagen, Denmark. Let's give Cheyenne a big round of applause, and she will introduce her panelists and take it away.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Hello. Thank you so much to Dana for your poem. I was just thinking I'm ready to go live in that country with you. So thank you for energizing us this morning. I'm Cheyenne Ellis, as Dana just shared, and I lead the humanitarian response work for CGI. That's an initiative of the Clinton Foundation that is led by former President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and Chelsea Clinton. So we are delighted to be a part of this needed and important conversation today. I want to first thank our host. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to Mary Anna for your leadership, for your vision, for getting us here, for inspiring us by this theme to step away from our inboxes. I recognize it's not a quiet time in the humanitarian sector. So drawing us to Doha at this moment is very important and exciting to see what happens next. To the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies, we are delighted to be in Doha for this discussion, particularly, and having such a diverse group of participants. So extending special gratitude to those who traveled from Sudan, Myanmar, from the Congo. I've been to many conferences, and not every conference prioritizes those local leaders as being a part of the discussion. So much gratitude for those who traveled and for prioritizing that as a part of this discussion. So it's really an honor and a privilege to launch the first panel discussion, first day, first morning. And the key theme that brought us here, as we've heard already, whether we flew 1 hour, whether we flew 17 hours to be here, is that term leadership. And we know at its core, leaders are problem solvers. And we also know that you can't solve problems alone. You really need to look at partnerships now more than ever. So this morning's discussion will center just on that, on partnerships, specifically on cross-sector partnerships and how philanthropy can be involved and support that. So I want to briefly share about the Clinton Global Initiative real quick, because at our core is partnership building and utilizing partnerships with the public sector, private sector, and civil society organizations. So unlike our guests representing philanthropy in the room who might be directly funding or directly running projects on the ground, we do not do that. We really look at implementing how to build coalitions, how to build collective approaches, and how to spur dialogue and discussions around these different topics. So as we launch into these 2 days of intentional time, again, having protected time to really stop, think, connect is really rare in this sector, just given how fast things change, how fast we move. So as we launch into these 2 days this morning, I want to encourage us to listen, to think, discuss, and connect with leaders across the industry. So the intent for this conversation this morning is to really anchor us in thinking about partnerships and thinking about what we can do together. So when we leave this conference room, this building, on Wednesday afternoon, We'll head back into our inboxes, we'll head back to our teams, and they're going to ask us likely, well, what did you do in Doha? What did you think? What did you learn in Doha? And my hypothesis is that we're not going to be able to say we solved the humanitarian aid infrastructure. We have developed sustainable funding architecture streams for this new paradigm that we are in. But perhaps we can say we now know more and new people that we can work with, and we can bring different approaches to the moment that we're in right now with how we're working together. We often know, though, as leaders, that challenges as complex as this, a single solution does not just solve the problem. It takes collaborative, novel strategies and a collective approach to problem solving. So one phrase we use at CGI often is, what's next? And this likely lands in a more specific way to those in the room right now. What's next? In this moment, what's next is not going to be a simple answer. It will not be a single solution approach. Again, it will take a collaborative approach involving different perspectives and involving all of us in the room present for those discussions. So while we were brainstorming the concept for this panel and what would be advantageous the first morning of the 2 days together, we thought a lot about the role philanthropy plays in the aid sector. How, given this moment, how can and how will philanthropy stretch to adapt the needs of this changing moment? And how can philanthropy help answer the question of what is next? So this morning, I am delighted to welcome 3 different perspectives to the stage with leaders representing different vantage points from global philanthropy, from regional philanthropy, as well as from hyper-local philanthropy, a representative here from Doha. So I'd like to please call to the stage Pilar Pacheco, representing the world's largest foundation, Gates Foundation. Pilar is a senior program officer of Emergency Response Global Development Division, and she brings more than 25 years of experience. Again, she brings many years of experience, intersection of development, disaster risk reduction, humanitarian action, and inclusion. And she also leads the emergency response emergency response team, preparedness work stream, partnering with governments, regional bodies, community-based organizations to strengthen resilient, inclusive, and locally led disaster preparedness and response systems across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. No easy job, Pilar. So thank you for extending your time to be with us today. I'd next like to invite and welcome Maya Ghosn Bichara to the stage. Maya is a Riyadh-based Lebanese-Brazilian philanthropist and an early-stage investor with a specific focus on health, especially those stigmatized areas within health, including mental health, reproductive sexual health, and addiction. She's also an operating partner at Bridge Builders Collaborative, is an active angel investor with over 30 companies she supports. Maya also spent time at McKinsey's social sector enterprise and helped build out the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. She also sits on the boards of several nonprofits, including Embrace, Juicor, as well as companies 07 Orchard, and is also a coach through her own business, Inward Onward. So Maya, thank you for being here today. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome local leadership to the stage, Mr. Abdulla Al-Fehani. If you are in the room, thank you so much. Abdulla is the Risk and Compliance Deputy Director General at the Qatari Fund for Development. He's a Qatari professional who is an expert in project management and delivery, which means he helps get things done. He oversees risk and management compliance and has played pivotal roles in the development of landmark projects, such as the Al Rayyan Stadium, the Lusail Stadium, under the Committee for Delivery and Legacy. He's also contributed significantly to Qatari's successful hosting of the FIFA World Cup in 2022. So again, Abdulla, Maya, and Pilar, thank you so much. Thinking about partnerships, I want to give each of our panelists a moment to share their specific approach to what building partnerships looks like. So Maya, I'd like to welcome and start with you. If you could please share a bit about the impact work that you lead. And as a philanthropist, you hold a unique role in this equation as well. So you could also share a bit about your impact strategy and really how you came to shape that vision.
Thank you so much. Is this working? Okay, awesome. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here. Kind of taking a step back, I think about partnerships in a couple of different ways. I think everything that I do aims to be purpose driven. And so that falls for me in a couple of different pillars. The first is partnerships in terms of the relationship between me as an investor and the technology companies that I invest in. All of the companies I invest in are purpose driven. They need to be socially positive for the world. And I almost exclusively invest in health technology companies with a little bit of financial inclusion. So there, to me, the partnership, to your question, Cheyenne, really looks like how can I be as valuable as possible as an investor, no matter how small my shareholding might be, whether it's through thought partnership, strategic support, connections to distribution, to fundraising opportunities, et cetera. So that's really the first pillar of the partnership work that I think of myself as really as a financial partner. The second is working with a handful of nonprofit partners. So I work with several organizations, many of which Cheyenne mentioned, in the Middle East, focused on either mental health or refugee support and supporting displaced populations. And there I'm quite an active board member, probably sometimes more active than would be liked, in the sense that I really see my role as supporting however I can, really meeting each organization where they are, and being helpful in internal operations, in fundraising, in high-level strategy and guidance, and in their development of partnerships. And then the third is as a coach, as you mentioned, a more individual level. So to me, this kind of plural portfolio of impact that I have, it was really just born out of my own lived experience and feeling deeply passionately about helping find and scale better solutions to the problems that I or loved ones have navigated or struggled with. And so it's been very, very organic. And I think that for me, sitting at the intersection of profit and purpose has also helped me hopefully push the boundaries of how each sector is really working in this space.
Thank you for sharing that. And Pilar, kind of zooming out from our regional perspective, I'd love to invite you now to share a bit about your perspective on leading a global philanthropic foundation like Gates. Could you tell us more a bit about your perspective on partnerships? And one thing I know about you, and I've known you over Zoom for a year and a half. So this is the first time we are meeting in person. And we actually connected through an organization, the Local Humanitarian Leadership Collaborative, that prioritizes localization in humanitarian action. So if you could also speak to a bit of how a foundation is as vast and big and powerful as Gates views partnerships while also continues to prioritize shifting the strategy to support local actors.
Well, thank you for the question. And it's when I hear someone talk about the Gates Foundation as being the largest philanthropy in the world, it's huge. But the work that we support globally, we couldn't do that without partners. And we look at partners, of course, our peers, our peer philanthropies, our close allies, close partners. Cheyenne was talking about the Local Humanitarian Leadership Collaborative, where we partner with other philanthropies to learn from each other, to understand how we're working with local partners, what we can do better, really being a community of practice, but taking that to action to improve our grant making, to really understand where we can connect more purposely and better with local actors. So that's one type of partnership, more at the peer level. But like I said, the work that we support wouldn't be successful if it weren't for the partners. The partners are the ones who are doing the hard work, who are with the communities, and that's at different levels, of course. global, regional, national, local. And we work closely by listening. We work closely by understanding what the needs are, by understanding what type of connections we can make with others, understanding the type of support. Someone said earlier in one of the comments, it's not necessarily just about the funding, just about the money. It's so much, it goes beyond that. It's about nurturing relationships. It's about cultivating those partnerships. We specifically in our team, the foundation is known for its global health work, its global development work, and we're a tiny piece in this larger puzzle. But with catalytic funding, because philanthropies can't really take the role of donor governments in the world, with catalytic funding, our partners do so much. So I think it's that approach of trust, of taking risks when need be, and really from a humble perspective, learning from our partners and trying to take that learning to others as well.
Thank you, Pilar, for elaborating on that and again adding that global perspective to your work. From zooming out, I want to zoom back in now, hyper local, and would like to welcome Mr. Abdulla to also answer the question how you're viewing partnerships in your work here in Doha over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, it's good to be here and welcome the attendees. Thank you for this chance. And what I would like to say about QFFT regarding the strategic partnership we look at, and currently we have enrolled like a new strategy for QFFT, which focuses mainly, one of the pillars will be on the partnerships. So we're looking like forward to look for new partners to add in the near future. And also we're working with different partners, including the UN and also local partners here. What we're trying to do, of course, in QFFT is look at the current strategy and focus on the projects which we are delivering and doing are mainly like more focused on the economic development. It's more on the health sector, more on the education, and also more on the also part of the climate change. So we're kind of envisaging to communicate that strategy to the partners and see who are the partners that we can cooperate with to get these strategies or pillars defined. And other than that, we are open to have partners who, of course, work in the field and have different presence in different countries, whom are recognized and have like good expertise in delivering. The main projects that QFFD is delivering currently, most of them are in the Middle East, others are in Africa. And as I said, like most of the focus is now in the economic development.
Thank you for sharing that. And the point on looking for new partnerships was well heard. And I imagine over the next 2 days, there'll be many people with questions and ideas. So glad you're here to be a part of this conversation. Thank you. So grounding us in partnerships, knowing why they're needed, how they're formed, and various different strategies across regions, cultures, etc. Want to drill in a bit and, of course, acknowledge the moment that we're in right now. We've heard many folks before mention this, and we're all acutely aware of this in this room as it very much shapes our work. And personally, I know that the theme of the conference was developed before the world changed, but I'm convinced Mariana has a crystal ball and knew that this was so important to have right now at this moment. So again, acknowledging the value of being here and stepping away and focusing our time and energy to have these conversations, to think about partnerships, problem solving, and leadership. But we're hearing all the terminology, the humanitarian reset, the restructure, the reform, and those aren't bad words per se. It's always a wise thing to encourage yourself to reimagine, reanimate, rethink, yet how it's done matters. And we have had the rug pulled out from under us, and we don't have plan Bs set up just yet. We're still in some triage moments here in the humanitarian aid sector. So I have a question for all panelists. Don't all hop in at once. It's another big, heavy question. But essentially, as leaders, we have to think about two things in parallel right now. We have to do that immediate response for our partners on the ground, triaging those who have experienced extreme loss of aid and what that means for life and death situations, frankly. The chessboard of this sector is now shifting in the question of what leadership looks like in the immediate days is going to play out over the next few months and hopefully in the next few days here in these discussions. We're already seeing what the sector could look like in response to the Myanmar and Thailand earthquakes now that USAID is no longer the leading player in immediate response. So I think we're going to learn a lot of lessons in this disaster right now. But I want to invite a two-part question to our leaders here on stage. When we look at the current geopolitical and humanitarian landscape, as well as these recognized and needed systems change in the overall sector, what types of partnerships are needed to meet this moment, the immediate moment? But in parallel, also, what is needed to sustain and scale these partnerships in the years ahead beyond this immediate response of aid? So looking at the immediate moment, the shock, but also what can we start doing now for that day after discussion as we think about a new sector emerging?
Maybe I can start, just and thank you, Mariana, for encouraging us to do away with talking points. I had scribbled a few notes and I'm like, okay, wait. We're among friends and community and I think we can all speak frankly and that's the point of these 2 days, right? To think together. I was talking about this with someone last night and I think we've gone over however many stages of grief over the past 2 months, which feel like a year or more. And some of us are still in shock. I have to go back to the shock in a couple of days. But I also see hope. And I know it's a little like, what? Hope? She just said it felt like a year and 2 months because it feels heavy. But I was recently in Ethiopia talking to the Minister of Health and other development partners. And this was a conversation also I was having with the Commissioner of the Disaster Risk Management Commission in Ethiopia. And he said, we've been so dependent on external aid that I'd like to thank the U.S. government and other governments who are reducing their aid. I was like, what? And he said, because this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to really think and reshape what, the system and our own systems. And, and when I was talking to him and others in these past few weeks, it's about how do we bring different stakeholders to the table? We were talking about partnerships, right? So who are those partners that had been missing from the conversation? Do governments talk to the private sector? Do communities involve their local business leaders? Is the government looking at the communities to engage and really understand what the needs are on the ground? So I think it's about bringing, and in the case of philanthropies like us, is there anything that we can do to convene everyone to the table? To have these conversations on equal terms. So when I reflect, and I may be rambling on, but when I reflect about this, it's like, are there new types of partnerships that weren't taking place before, and there's a space to do so now? So I'll leave it there while, maybe we build on each other's comments.
Thank you so much for that inspiring, optimistic take on the moment. Abdulla or Maya, if you want to add in your perspectives.
Yeah, I'll build up. Thank you, Pilar. I really appreciate that perspective and the opportunity that has presented itself. I think that I'll respond more from kind of a philanthropy standpoint, and then also what I've seen with the nonprofits that I'm working with. From a philanthropic standpoint, I think taking a couple of steps back, we, as you mentioned, Cheyenne, are operating in a time of kind of acute uncertainty geopolitically, economically, socially. And like on top of that, when an organization or a leader is operating in a humanitarian crisis, there is a whole other layer of uncertainty. And I think now more than ever, leaders need to be able to be flexible, agile, proactive, responsive. And in order to do that, I think they need the trust of the philanthropies that are either backing them or are interested in backing them to really have broader guardrails for the work that they're doing and to have a longer term viewpoint. I think that what is needed and hopefully what will change and be catalyzed by this is just more trust-based philanthropy and really leading from behind and identifying leaders that are really trusted and giving them broader support that has more longitudinal visibility, right? But also the opportunity for them to be able to shift not just what they work on, but how they work, especially in humanitarian crises. So I think that I speak as a philanthropist. That's something I want to be really mindful of. And I think institutional philanthropy also has an opportunity to start to evolve past what I think are archaic models of giving that are project-based, I think that are short-term, that have extremely stringent data collection requirements that honestly are almost, many of which I think are very difficult and almost impossible in a humanitarian crisis. And I see that like the data collection kind of burden being prohibitive to a lot of nonprofits I work with in receiving the funding that they need and quite frankly deserve. So I think there's that piece. Oh, thank you. I'm glad that resonated. It's a work in progress, but I would say on that side, and then on the nonprofit side, I think to what you were sharing, Pilar, I think what I've really noticed in some of the nonprofits so far is kind of having to push out of one's zone of comfort as it relates like your fundraising strategy. So some nonprofits that I know have had largely institutional donors are trying to develop now an individual donor strategy, or they're actually building out revenue generating streams for things that they were previously giving out as free kind of indiscriminately. They're kind of figuring out, okay, how do I tier this and maybe charge a smaller price for community members or organizations that are actually able and willing to pay? Why not charge? And then use that revenue to fund other work. So I think it is hopefully going to continue to inspire a level of innovation, creativity, more sustainability. But I think a big opportunity for philanthropy is really to just rethink the way that we show up and contribute and support, especially in these times.
I think these are good points. And also from our perspective, from QFFT, what we're looking at, especially what we're doing now, as I said, we are partnering with local partners like Qatar Crescent, Qatar Charity, and also we're also doing a partnership with UN, also organizations like the UNDP and others, which are well known. But the things that we're looking at is really, the focus that we do is economic development and aid. And aid means like sometimes like emergent or emergency response. And emergency response like differs in different areas, different occasions. We don't know what's happening, and it comes in sudden. It happens in like countries in Asia and Africa. And what happens at these emergencies can be like 2 weeks, they can be 2 months, who knows. And when that happens, there are many things to address. And the main things, we address the humanitarian part a lot, but also what are the perspective we're looking at is like the economic enablement side. So when you have like buildings like hospitals, there, schools, and you want to resume everything normal, it's really like challenging. And one of the challenge part will be like the power. And there are like organizations who are trying, but till now, I believe there is a lot of room to work on that part, which you can provide something either like remote or mobile. that you can work on these, especially like critical buildings, and help them to be like to enable them in that period. I believe this is something like very critical to look at. Something is not like normal or out of the box, but like something to see in the future.
Thank you for acknowledging we need both the creative solutions, but sometimes there are also simple solutions that we know well, that we just need to bring a new perspective to. So thank you for that. My next question, I want to dive a little bit deeper on that cross-sector leadership concept. And Pilar, you mentioned that earlier a bit when thinking about, when we solve problems, how do we bring civil society, public sector, private sector to the table, as well as the philanthropic sector. So again, this question is for all of the panelists here today. Pilar, again, you represent a more traditional, large philanthropic organization. Maya, you're a purposeful investor. And Abdulla, you lead hyperlocal work here in Doha. So everyone bringing that unique vantage point. And what would you say and suggest are qualities needed right now for leadership to continue to spur that cross-sector partnerships among your peers?
Okay. I can jump in. I'll start. Thanks for that great question. I'd say a couple of things. I think the first that is really important, in my opinion, is just being a systems thinker and really being able to focus on kind of be able to experience and see the world outside of your organizational boundaries and really think about where you fit into a broader integrated system. And I think coupled with that, being willing to focus on collective impact over and above individual impact. So that tactically could look like information sharing, resource sharing, credit sharing, being much more collaborative in the way that you not just see the world, but also act in the world as an organization. I think the second to me is also bridge building, especially now, especially given the importance of cross-sector partnerships. So being willing to, I think, and I'll keep saying this, get out of one's comfort zone and actually make new relationships, connect with new stakeholders, and really cultivate those relationships and being able and willing to speak a language that resonates across kind of sectoral boundaries. I think we are all guilty of having our own jargon, but like really being able to resonate and tell your story, especially with the private sector now, I think is very, very important. So I think those are some of the qualities that come to mind. And I think they're generally very, very important, but especially in this time of divisiveness are critical.
Maybe because I'm thinking what you were saying resonated with me because so the foundation has like 5 core values. Rigor, innovation, this is like a test. Rigor, innovation, collaboration, optimism, and inclusion. And we truly believe that everyone has and deserves the opportunity, the chance to live healthy, productive lives. We live and breathe that from our and the foundation is celebrating its 25 years this year. So, it's really something that, those values and that belief, it's deeply rooted. But as we're facing this challenging times, I think that that collaboration piece is very, very important. And we approach those, or we use these values, we approach our relationships based on those values. So it's about co-creating with our partners. As a philanthropist, it's not about, of course, there's an alignment in terms of strategic priorities that we may have. Different philanthropies have different areas that they're more focused on, but it's about co-creating, aligning. So being that strategic thinker, that supporter, using, in our case, that convening power, even our name or not, because it depends on the context. And being okay with that. So having that flexibility, being inclusive. So more and more I'm thinking, it's like those values that we recite, we really need to continue using that and apply them to our leadership styles. So just, you made me reflect on that and really being that that good partner and good listener, so that we can create really meaningful and long-lasting sustainable impact.
Could I add to that for a moment? You helped me remember that I missed the most important one from my perspective, which you touched on, which is humility. I think that especially in this time, as you were alluding to, Cheyenne, we need to be willing to acknowledge that the way that we've been doing things and or are doing things, no matter how much goodwill or good intent was behind it, is worth reinvestigating and shifting and evolving. And I think that that just requires a lot of humility, and of course a growth mindset. But I think beneath that, being willing to say, hey, like that used to work, or maybe it didn't. That's something that we need to now put back on the table and reinvestigate and unpack and see how we might need to shift it in the current evolving landscape.
One part from my side, which is like with the partnership, I see like today, especially with the coming needs and all the challenges, there is a lot of room to improve from our side. What we're doing, even with the partners, for every occasion, for every chance we have a discussion, we always go with the open discussions. We discuss like challenges that they have there on their side, from our side. So we're very open on that. And what we always look or strive even for improvement, or kind of what can be done. Always we ask the question, what can be done better? What can we do better together? So always we look at that. We look at the challenging parts. There's always this kind of maybe contractual agreement, all of that. But far from that perspective, you have to look at what are the opportunities that you can bring for that. So always when we're discussing with partners, we look at that perspective to ensure that we have room to improvement, and we always like to kind of see, I'm not gonna say the traditional way how to do things, but see how can things be done in a better way.
Yeah, thank you for all of those various perspectives, and again, rooting us in some of those qualities like humility and also creative thinking to again meet the moment that we're in. I want to dig a little deeper on some of those phrases that we've used, particularly around trust. And in the humanitarian sector, philanthropic sector, trust-based philanthropy is also not a new word or term. We've used it for many years, many moons now. Yet again, as we think about what's needed right now in the sector, in the moment, that concept of trust feels just so much more pertinent and valuable. I'd love to hear, from this diverse group of philanthropists on stage with us right now, how you are thinking about integrating trust in your mindset of giving, in your mindset of partnership, or even if you have any anecdotes or examples of things that have worked, things that aren't working, things that you are looking to explore in terms of solidifying trust into how you are giving, how you're supporting organizations.
I'll say, I think a couple things. So building on what I shared earlier and what we've been discussing, I think general, as a philanthropist, trust to me looks like moving towards more of general operating support, and also giving longer term grants as opposed to shorter term grants where you almost have these constant checkpoints of saying, hey, do you still deserve this? Like, are you still good enough to warrant additional funding? I think that dynamic, in my opinion, needs to be totally shifted. And so I think general operating support is a big part of that. Longer term giving. I definitely think there's space for responsive grant making. And I saw a lot of that. Being of Lebanese origin, I work with a lot of Lebanese nonprofits. I saw a lot of that in the escalation of the war last year, where incredible funders were coming and saying, hey, listen, we've got this pot of money. You tell us how to use it. Like, what do you think is most helpful? It doesn't need to be aligned with what you were doing before or what you're going to do tomorrow, but like what's needed today. I would love to embody that personally and to encourage more donors to do that when the time calls for it responsively. I think also trust to me looks like, as philanthropists, we don't need to be the sole decision makers. I think participatory grant making, so bringing in peer organizations to actually review and select each other, bringing in diverse voices, whether it be youth voices or kind of non-traditional voices, to actually make grant making decisions and putting together formal structures for that, I think could be really powerful. And I'd say the other thing is on data collection and tracking, and essentially impact tracking. being able to actually, to me, trust looks like asking the organization, hey, how do you measure success? Tell us what success looks like to you and what it will need to look like over the next few years, if your goals are met, as opposed to it being a top-down assertion. I think really having M&E being bottoms up would be, to me, more aligned with the kind of trust-based philanthropy that I think we can move towards.
So sometimes, because the Gates Foundation is so big, we may be perceived as that traditional philanthropist who's very top down. And maybe when I first joined the foundation almost 14 years ago, I also thought, and actually I was a recipient of foundation funding before joining the foundation. So sometimes I did think, they didn't ask me, they told me. And we've come a long way. Is there still room for improvement? Yes. But that co-creation part that I was talking about, or that collaboration or inclusivity, and there are some of the people that we support, organizations that we support in the room. You can ask them later. I think we're as flexible as we can be, and we are learning with our partners to be more flexible. So that's, I think that's a big thing. We check in, of course, but not check in the sense of, so are you doing what you said you were going to do? It's more the check in, did it work? And if it didn't, why didn't it? Can we support you? Can we learn together? Do you need to course correct? So really it's sometimes I think we're a lot more involved than our grantees want us to be, because it's such a rich learning opportunity for me as a program officer, right? Who work with other organizations, that I can take that learning and either share it with others or connect the partners. So it's changing our mindsets to, yes, rely and trust that things are getting done. There are, of course, the short-term or more immediate grants that we provide for emergency response, for example. But for preparedness, which is something that I advocate for, because we can't continue being in this responsive mode the whole time. There isn't enough funding available to cover the humanitarian needs. So we need to, work on risk reduction, preparedness, resilience, and that's longer term. We have to we really need to work with our partners to understand, how much time do you think we need? Is it 3 years? Is it 5? We've been supporting near somewhere for 10 years, because that's what it takes. Or the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. We've been partners for, 15 years, because relationships take time. So I really, take what you say, and it, like I said, is there room for improvement? Probably, but I hope that my peer and my fellow philanthropies, we really get on the same page. And I think that cohort, the local humanitarian leadership cohort, that gives me hope, because I think we're all on the same page when it comes to that. So, yeah.
Yes, so well said. And Abdulla, want to offer you the time.
I like the part from what Pilar mentioned on the sharing knowledge. So that's very important. And there is also the part that we focus on the lesson learned, what happened in other projects, on other. So that's what I will say in that part from trust is the continuing communication. Yes, we have ways to report, ways to communicate, all of that, but always the continuous talk, continuous communication is a part or is a sign of trust that you can give to the partners. And I think from all the time I work, this is like a strong tool that you can use the whole time. And it's like you have to be like open in discussions. You have to express because it's not the normal social relationship you have. It's more of the career relationship, and where you have like open discussions and even like open issues. So that's the trust part.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for everyone's candor in this conversation, and really thinking also about the implementers in the audience as you're thinking about relationships and partnerships with philanthropy going forward. So thank you for all of that insight. So I've saved my favorite two questions for the end, and then soon we'll switch and you can ask us questions. So get ready. But my first question is, looking at the stage today, it's a majority female panel. Abdulla, we are thrilled you're here too. Yes, because men are also needed in this conversation. But I would like to invite each of you to, as we think about our responsibility, how can everyone in this room, the leaders in this room, think about growing gender balanced leadership within this sector, and how will that translate into women and girls equality in the humanitarian sector? So again, not an easy, light question, but would welcome anyone's response.
And what we're doing in QFFD, there are different projects we're doing around the world, and many of them humanitarian focus on also the skills or the job creation and all of that. And many parts where you see that, either it's in countries maybe like maybe I can name like countries maybe like Nigeria, Morocco, others, but always there is the social part you support, and that social part can be like the job creation, and also in Asia that's evident. So from that part, there is a part you can see how to support a house, how to support like a community. So if you look from that perspective, what we focus on is like the beneficiary numbers. And a lot of the beneficiary, when you go to the ground and see it like how it looks like, really there's a lot of support to women when it comes to like the job creation, how it can help the community, the families, all of that. So that part is very important to look at when you look at the details and perspective. And you look like it's not only about, sometimes you look at it from high level at statistic. When you go to the ground, it's more of like how the coherent can work, how this community can work, all of that. So from that part, women enablement, education, all of that plays an important role in that perspective.
Thank you.
So I've been, something that I've been grappling with is in the humanitarian sector, when we talk about women and girls, we tend to gravitate to women and girls, how they experience and how they're impacted differently by disasters, which is, of course, a reality and something that we need to definitely address. But we need to go beyond that and think about how do we enable the environment so that women and girls can exercise the power that they already have. It's not about empowering them, it's creating or supporting the conditions so that they can exercise their leadership. So yes, while of course supporting different programs, projects that address the inequities and how women and girls are impacted differently by disasters, we need to also think about, are we supporting women-led organizations? Are we really looking at women's leadership and enabling the environment for that leadership to be exercised? Are the capacity strengthening programs, is it just the training, or is it something beyond that, which it is? So that's how we at and address inequities and women's and girls' needs. So yes, and that's, I think, what I'd like to say about that.
Yeah, thank you. That really resonates, both of your responses. I think building on that, as it relates to fostering more gender equitable leadership in the industry, I think there are three layers of it. I think there's what can be done on an individual level. I think individually, each one of us in the room can really think about how and who we mentor. Also how and who we sponsor. I think there's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship, where mentorship is about guidance and support. Sponsorship is about actually creating opportunities for someone else. I think we can be mindful about whose voices we amplify around a table, and also whose expertise we value or credit when we talk about our work. I think there's so many ways in which we individually can really help push this forward. Organizationally, I think things like family-friendly policies around career advancement, things like diverse hiring slates. So when you're hiring a role, making sure you have a diverse candidate slate so that you're actually really pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to try to hire the best person for the role. Also clear guardrails and guidelines for promotion. And then I think on an industry level, I really resonate with what you're saying about capacity building, training programs, leadership development programs. So I think there's a lot that can be done, and I actually think so much of it can really be led by, each of us in the room on this topic.
Yeah, thank you. Good call to action as we think about what we want to take back to our teams, to our offices on Wednesday afternoon. My next and kind of final question here, again, I think it's so poignant and symbolic that we're having this conversation in Doha over the next few days. So Maya, Abdulla, Pilar, I would invite you to share from your perspectives, given the growing role and influence of the Middle East and North Africa region, how do you see this region's leadership in aid and recovery and development continue to develop in the years ahead?
I will use my notes because I was talking to a colleague this morning and we're talking about the region. And it's so encouraging to see what the region is doing, what the leaders here are doing, the work that the foundations, the philanthropy, what they're supporting. I get emotional because it's so important in these troubling times, in these really difficult times. So the foundation has really strong ties and partnerships in the region. And we're really proud of that. We partner, for example, a lot with on the health sector. Polio eradication is, you probably heard Bill Gates talk about that quite a bit. That's his big goal. And we are very, very proud to partner with philanthropies here in the region on global polio eradication initiatives. And that's very encouraging. While funding is being reduced or simply stopped in that area, the region stepping up and partnering with us. So to all of you representing philanthropies here in the region, we're really grateful for that support. So that advocacy as well, because like we said, it's not just about the funding, but about using our convening power and our voices. And what I've heard in the morning here, just from government officials, from what you're doing, I think that's the encouraging and the optimist in me that gives me hope. Thank you.
From the leadership perspective, I believe in this region, there's a big challenge with all the things happening. So it's a ground that a lot for the leader, they can grow a lot with this, what's happening here. There's a big chance with working with a lot of partners because really there's a big involvement from international partners in the region. And other than that, looking at the perspective that we have for the leadership, we need to see. There are many things that have been done, but I think coming forward, the main thing that we need to see, like on the choices that we make or what we're going to do, what will be the impact really, because you look at it from like social others, you look at it also from financial. And that relation need to be like from the leader, like kind of looked at or kind of maybe studied or something to be to put in their mind while they're doing the things that need to be done. There are many things to do. There are many ideas, many things that can be done, but that impact or how it will continue in the future is very important, because some things they can do and they can work, but you don't know what will happen after 5-10 years.
Thank you. I'll just add and say, I think more my aspiration and hope is that as the Middle East, in particular Gulf countries, participate more in aid and global aid, that they are able to influence more of the global aid agenda to include regional needs and priorities, regional cultural perspectives. I really hope that we can shift some of the power dynamics that have existed for a long time in global aid allocation and dialogue. And so that's more of a hope than a seed that I'll plant right now for when we have this conference in the next few years. And I feel like I'm starting to see that shifting, and hopefully it will continue to do so.
No, thank you for that. And that is a good point, thinking about what the next 2 to 5 years of this discussion will look like, who will be in the room, who will be leading conversations, etc. So thank you for everyone's perspective. And I have one final, it's not necessarily a question, but more of a hope, a wish in the spirit of optimism. And one of my personal favorite quotes that really resonates with me right now is by former US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. And she used to say, "I'm an optimist who worries a lot." And that's how I feel about right now. There are things to be hopeful for, but there's a lot of concern and there's a lot of worry. Again, more important to be here today over the next 2 days in discussion and in partnership. So I invite each of our leaders on stage, each of our panelists, to offer one key final message that you'd like to leave to the participants as we launch into 2 days of thinking, of listening, of workshopping, really related to how to continue to strive for greater leadership during these unique and challenging times.
I'll kick it off and say, I think that, speaking for myself, I think it's easy for me to sometimes get overwhelmed by just how much is going on and how much feels like it's out of my control. I often feel quite powerless in the face of, especially in recent months and years, everything that's been transpiring. So I think my encouragement would be to really think about everything as really being kind of an inside job, and that it all starts with us. There are so many things we actually have the power to do to shift whatever it is that we want to shift. So my encouragement would be, if anything resonated from this panel, just think about what is the one thing that you can do to really embody or affect that change within your realm of control and influence. I know it sounds small, but at least for me, it's really helped my mental health in these times. And I hope that it can really encourage you to remember the power that you have in the sphere that you're working in.
Being a woman and an immigrant right now, it's not easy. I have to go back to that environment. And I also get overwhelmed sometimes. But, I do try to embrace those vulnerabilities and talk about that. So I think, and I have different types of partnerships that allow me to do that. So maybe over the 2 days that you'll be here, it's first, allow yourself to be vulnerable. You've said that you've had leaders, there are leaders on the stage, but all of you are leaders. So embrace that vulnerability, embrace that leadership that you have, cultivate relationships and partnerships. And remember that there are different types of partnerships. You can have a thought partner, not just a funding partner, or someone who challenges you. So I think it's just embracing our essence and bringing that up front as you all interact, among yourselves and with us.
I believe for the coming time, the thing that we need to be kind of aware or put in our mind is not to keep things constant. I know sometimes it's good to be in the routine, but always we have to see what's the perspective that we can improve the whole time. This is very and I can see it done very thoroughly, beneficially with the partners, because different perspective, different countries, different sectors can bring different ideas. So that's the main thing. And always keep explore or see the opportunities that come the whole time. This is the 2 things I think you can take with you and see how things can be more beneficial in the future.
Yeah, thank you all for those inspiring tidbits and reminders to keep in mind over the next few days. And again, thank you for your time to be a part of this discussion, whether you came down the street or came across the pond to be a part of these 2 days. Really grateful for your leadership and for your vision in setting the tone for the next few days of this conference. So with that, I think we get to reverse and turn it over to our MC who will moderate the Q&A. So thank you.
Round of applause, please. Thanks, Cheyenne, and thanks, panelists, for getting us off to a great start. My name's Matt Tinkler. I'm the CEO of Save the Children Australia. I'm also the chair of the Centre Executive Committee, which is the board that governs the Centre for Humanitarian Leadership, and I've been involved with the CHL since its inception, and it's a real privilege to be with you here today. A big thanks to our hosts and our partners and to all of you from attending. Panelists, please stay with us. We're keen to open this up to the audience now to get your questions. I can see lots of hands going up. We do have about 20 minutes or so. I'm also conscious that many of you probably arrived late last night. You might be on a different time zone, so we're also between you and caffeine or sugar. Some of you, some of us may need that. So we'll keep it reasonably tight. But yes, when I do come to you, can you please briefly state your name and your organisation and make sure it's a question, not a comment, for our panelists, please. Otherwise, I will take it as a comment and move on. Yes, in the front here in the yellow, please.
Hi, I'm Marie-Rose Murphy. I'm with the Haiti Community Foundation, and I'm also the co-chair of the Global Advisory Review panel for Pledge for Change. Thank you very much for your presentations. That was interesting to see from regional to global to local. The question that I have for you, and some of you have talked about resilience, preparedness, and everything else. What are you thinking or doing in terms of ecosystem development? Because what's been happening is showing what overdependence on institutional funding or anything for that matter is toxic. So the reality is that societies are only as strong as their systems. And right now, I mean, if we're looking at the global framework in which we operate, we have systems that are definitely completely unequal. So when I think about ecosystem development, I think about nation building, I think about self-sufficiency, I think about all of us eventually, hopefully, working ourselves out of a job, making sure that countries, local organizations, and everything else have systems in place and actually do not depend on us and communities. So is there anything that you're doing in terms of advocacy, in terms of investment, in terms of your approach? I'm just very curious about it. In terms of taxation, reparations, anything of that kind?
Great.
Just wondering. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question. So panel, over to you. Perhaps Cheyenne, you haven't had a chance to participate rather than moderate. Would you like to kick us off on your reflection?
Yes, no, thank you for that question and for all that you're leading in Haiti. You know, that has been an area that we've been involved in at the Clinton Foundation for many, many, many years. And I know it's also not an easy place to operate right now. And, you know, from the lens of a non-funding foundation, again, how we approach these problems is through convening, is through spurring hard conversations, and really through that advocacy piece. And frankly, all of us very much sit in a place of privilege right now in philanthropy. So again, important to be having these conversations, but where we can add support as a foundation who does not directly fund, I find the advocacy piece and the storytelling piece to be so powerful. And how can we use our platform and frankly our Rolodex as well to make sure we are speaking about sustainability in these crises and conflicts, to make sure that we are speaking about inclusive participation, whether it be gender, whether it be local leaders, whether it be generational leaders. Maya, I really liked what you said about including youth voices in the younger generation in the conversations now and starting that now. So while, you know, we don't add value through financial support directly, that advocacy and that continuing to drive attention and discussion and awareness with the folks who do have the purse or who do have the power to support financially, all of that needs to happen together at the same time, kind of churning in motion. So I will continue to make that argument why advocacy matters and why the storytelling piece matters. And real quickly, I'll say, you know, in the US, what was fascinating over the last few months, one of the many things, and that's putting it diplomatically, is a lot of Americans did not understand what USAID did or does and how that worked and why it was so important. So that was a wake-up call, I think, for many folks to realize that storytelling piece matters. We have to educate, and those who have the power and the platform to tell the story also need to do a better job in that sense. So thank you.
Thanks, Cheyenne. And yes, sometimes we don't miss it until it's gone, do we? And we might grab another question and then open up to the panel. Yes, just if you can stand up. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. My name is Tamreez Khan and I represent only myself. I'd like to bring up an elephant in the room, which is the issue of billionaire philanthropy. So there's been a lot of talk about the sort of the domination of what charities like Gates and CGI, the impact and the influence that they have on global politics and economics. And a lot of it is negative impact. We've heard a lot of controversial stories about the leaders, the founders of both these foundations. I mean, one is an ex-president who was involved in, bombing the Middle East and continuing that. And the other one has said a number of controversial things about Africa, and his own version of philanthropy is more about influence and control than it is about charity. So I just want to ask, with that legacy in mind, how do you see your positionality in today's world where everything is so up to chance? I mean, either of these foundations at one point can decide that they no longer want to be involved in philanthropy anymore, and the entire system can come crashing down, just the way USAID did. So how do you see yourself as representing billionaire philanthropists in today's world, which should not be about personalities and billionaire philanthropy, but rather about a more collective way of coming together to support ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you. So great question. How do we reconcile this concentration of wealth and power with the mission we all have? Panel, let's open it up. Who would like to address this one first?
Thank you. I remember I was in Vietnam once and I walked into, it was a public library, and there was a room that had Bill Gates' name on it. And I was like, why? And because we were funding, the foundation was funding a libraries program. It was a digital inclusion program. And I asked, and so many people had no idea who Bill Gates was. And like, so why would you put Bill Gates' name on the room? Shouldn't it be like a local leader, a library user? I don't know, the mayor, whatever. And I think that's and this was, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. And I think that's something that's changed. Philanthropic organizations that are led by a family, by a person, yes, they have their own interests. And, I have to understand that or move on somewhere else. Do I wish we did more work in Latin America, where I'm from? Yes. Do we do it? Not necessarily. So I myself make my own decisions and trade-offs. So the reason why I was telling that Vietnam story, because something that I think has changed, or at least those of us working at the foundation, we work with our partners. It's like, although our partners are welcome to use our voice and our brand, they don't need to. like someone said, and I think it was the lady in yellow, we need to work ourselves out of a job because philanthropies don't fund things in perpetuity, right? We can't take the place of governments. So it's aligning on what is important. It's aligning on our priorities and having the tough conversations to see where we diverge and what we can do about that. You know, how can we be better partners without putting an agenda on the organizations, on the countries and the communities? My reflection.
Thanks, Pilar. Cheyenne.
Yeah, or just real quickly, I'll also add, prior to working in this role, I worked in local economic development in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I live now. If anyone wants to come visit, you are always welcome. And I remember after 2 weeks with CGI, I remember calling my mother and saying, whoa, Mom, I am convinced that there are enough resources in the world to solve all the problems. We could figure out the equity thing. We could figure out how to better resource resiliency and prepare for climate change. The money is there. We still do not work together. The fundamental issue, the fundamental things that you learn as a child in grade school about sharing and working together and communicating, seeing that play out in a global arena has been really interesting. And yet, you know, I really come back to those who do at this moment still have a platform and have a following and are able to bring folks together. They have a responsibility to bring folks together around certain topics at certain times and really prioritize, you know, minority groups, marginalized groups now more than ever. So while the foundation, you know, has this unique platform and role for advocacy, I think it is our continued responsibility to not be quiet and to continue to support and raise awareness for these topics. So, and thank you for asking that question. I think that's a very valid and important question to ask. So thank you.
Maya, would you like to comment as well?
I'll just add, and I think what you both said really resonates. I think I used to work at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which I think was mentioned, and I transitioned about 5 years ago. But I think for me, one of the ways in which we try to address the power dynamics that are inherent in having a foundation or a philanthropy that was started by a family or an individual is really being mindful about the how we do our work as opposed to just the what. So by that, I mean really leaning into things like participatory grant making. So a lot of the grant making we do actually brings peer organizations and has them evaluate each other to inform the decision, as opposed to it being, you know, a philanthropist and kind of their ivory tower in Silicon Valley. So there's that piece of it. We always work in partnership. So we very, very rarely do things on our own because we want to avoid things like king making or queen making in a specific ecosystem, right? Picking the one nonprofit that gets a lot of the funding. So there's a lot of intentionality in at least how the work is done to really try to acknowledge the realities of the context that you know the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is working in. And again, my information is 5 years old, but that's really kind of how we worked. And I want to build on what you said, Pilar, which is that sometimes it's useful to you know leverage the name, and sometimes it isn't. And so just being responsive and humble and honest about like, hey, you know, when can actually leveraging our network be helpful to this grantee? And when actually should we be really clear about leading from behind and saying, hey, we're just here as funders in the background, and, you know, you do what you need to do and you hold the space and the context and the convenings that you need to be in.
Thank you. Yes, the gentleman on the aisle here.
Well, thank you very much for having this useful and encouraging conversation. As a young or as a local leader, it's very encouraging to hear all of these messages. So my question now, how the current foundation, philanthropists who are involved on all of this great work can influence other philanthropists and wealthy individuals who might be potentially interested in the same great work that is being done, and the government. So it's a time of change. This is, I think, the repeated messages that I'm hearing, but I'd like also to hear from the philanthropist side how they can influence others to mobilize the same resources or additional resources to continuing this great work. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So, Abdulla, perhaps we could start with you, given the influence of this region and the growing impact that's having. What are your reflections on that question on how to influence wealth and other philanthropists to give?
Yeah, so QFFD, from their perspective, we work with local partners, we work with also international partners, and also the local partners, they work with local community. Sometimes even it's like more of support. I mean, the focus or the support is on outside of Qatar, which is like the development and the aid. And I see a lot of things happening. Is there a way to improve? Yes, there is a way to improve, to make it better, to have more focus. Now, from our perspective, we have aligned the strategy like this year to do that, to focus on the important sectors. So from our part, we focus the important sectors that we believe, or we look at what we see a lot of issues, or where there are a lot of room to kind of contribute on. However, from our perspective, we look at economy enablement, and that's the part that we focus on. And we focus like our kind of focus our mind, and focus also our contribution to that part.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel like to comment on this?
I'll mention, I think to me, something that's really important in terms of encouraging other philanthropists is creating, there's a balance between holding philanthropy accountable and also creating a learning environment and creating grace for philanthropy to figure out how to do things effectively. And I think that what philanthropists can do, I think, is model candor and vulnerability about like, hey, this is what's really hard. This is what we're still figuring out. This is what we think we are figuring out well. I think to the extent we can be more honest and vulnerable about what we're learning and what isn't working, I really believe that would encourage more people to think of themselves as philanthropists and to kind of step into the philanthropy context.
Great, thank you. We might just go to the other side of the room we've probably got time for one more question, I think. Yes, the gentleman standing up, thank you.
Hello, I am Arman. I come from Afghanistan. I am CEO and founder of Teach for Afghanistan, a local non-for-profit organization working to improve quality education for women in Afghanistan. My question is, what percentage of your funding goes to local organizations? And how easy and accessible have you made it for local organizations to reach out to you, to apply for your funding, to meet you, and ultimately get a funding? Thank you.
A great question on accessibility for local actors to the sort of funding opportunities you represent. So anyone on the panel like to go first on this one? Pilar.
I don't think I have the statistics for the entire foundation, our team. So I can speak about the work of our team, which is the emergency response. And we've set ourselves a target of 25%. And then increasing that over the years of our overall budget, that goes to local organizations and local partners. And in local partners, we do, it's not just civil society or local NGOs, but it's also local governments at national or state, local level. So just wanted to be transparent about that. So it's right now it's between 25 to 30%. We work through intermediaries at the regional level or the national level when necessary, like through organizations like NEAR, like the Asian Disaster Preparedness. So I think it's still work in progress. We don't necessarily, the foundation as a whole, we don't necessarily accept, because we're so large, like uninvited proposals. However, we do get those emails quite a bit, and we reply. So one way of doing that is, or trying to reach more local partners, is through like innovation challenges. That's one way. But what else am I thinking? And I don't want to ramble just because. Yeah, so and we can happy to talk over coffee when all of you who have unanswered questions or that didn't get to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Pilar. Cheyenne, and then Abdullah, and then we will have to wrap for the next session.
I will add what I will add to what was said or to your question is like we're working on some, we don't have something yet for that to have it like we have a kind of direct engagements, but to add to that, we're working on something to have something like to kind of share with the community what will be so yearly or like every 2 years we do like a plan on what we should do, what are the sectors to focus on. So we cannot be like spread everywhere, but what we're planning to do to have something like kind of guidance or what is the focus, especially when it comes to kind of aid and then to economic development in other sectors. So that's something we will be looking to do in the future, and maybe we'll even show maybe the countries or something just for the community or the local organization to see.
Great, thank you. Look, I know many of you have other questions, which is fantastic, but we are just getting started. We've got 2 days ahead of us. All of our panelists will be here during the coffee break. So please, if you're an introvert like me, come out of your shell, go and introduce yourself to someone new. That's my piece of homework to you during the break. But thank you for your interest and your engagement and your energy. Can you please join me in thanking our panel, Pilar, Cheyenne, Maya, and Abdullah? You've gotten us off to a great start, and I'm going to hand back over to Dana now to take us to the break.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you again to all of our panelists and our moderator and all of the speakers from this morning. Let's give them all another round of applause.